Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today you're tuning in to Spell It Out, Magic, Reflections, and Shadows, where I take a topic and I run with it. Today I'm going to do a mini rant, a tarot-related rant, and I'm going to talk about two very influential essays in the history of the occult tarot. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our show. We're very excited to have you guys here. Just to give you a rundown on what we've got coming up this month, we've got some fantastic guests. Next week, we have Anique, Radiant Heart, and she's a high priestess from the goddess Temple Maitland. And she will be talking about her tradition, which involves a lot of chanting and so forth. So I'm super excited about that. The following week, we have Brother Valdir Farah, and he is a French Freemason. So we'll be getting into some of the differences between French Freemasonry and Royal Arch Freemasonry and some of his particular twist on Freemasonry. So that should be a lot of fun. And then a show we've been looking forward to since we booked it. We have Gina Armstrong and Victoria Vanchek from Haunted History, British Columbia, and we'll be doing a show all on cryptoids. So if you're into Bigfoot and all things kind of Loch Ness Monster and mysterious, join us for that one. And then we're finishing the month with our good friend Reverend Jim McGrath. And so we've got lots of great content coming up. Get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. While you're there, if you can afford to, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. It makes us feel good. It helps cover some of our production costs. And so it's a nice thing to do for us. And if you can't afford it, we're just happy to have you anyway. We love doing the show for all of you. Or you can sign up for our newsletter. And then if you're into tarot or wanting to get into tarot, I'll be teaching a series of tarot classes starting in August on the 18th. On a Thursday night, it'll be a 7-week series. And just email me and I can give you more information on that. So don't want to take up any more of Krista's time because she definitely wants to rant about this and I'm looking forward to it. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thanks, Michael. And you can also go to our website, mysticraven.net, to find out more about the tarot class. So why do I want to rant about this, you may ask? Well, because until very, very recently, the two essays are basically written by two French Freemasons, actually, Antoine de Gebelin, and then the second fellow, Louise Raphael Lucrèce de Fayol, known more as the Comte de Mellet. They have two tarot essays that were basically published at the end of the 1700s that changed the course of tarot being viewed as mostly a game, a very popular game, which it still is actually. And they're definitely given some credit. But what I want to rant about was until really recently, these essays were only available in French. And I remember looking, I think before in the 1900s, 1990s, I looked for it, a copy of it, and certainly if you can read French, you can find it. But it was really bizarre to me that a lot of the tarot historians and scholars, they were not publishing a good translation of it. So the first one I ever found in print is called Rhapsodies of the Bizarre, the Tarot Essays of Antoine de Gebelin and Le Comte de Mellet, and it's translated by J. Carlin, and it was published 2001. That is no longer in print, but you might be able to find a used copy. And what I really like about it was, one, the reason he decided to translate it was he couldn't find one in English. And he even contacted somebody in the tarot world, and the person didn't even know that there were copies in French in libraries that were really easy to get to. And we'll talk about sort of where these essays appeared too in the show. So he was really troubled by that, and he went out of his way to then translate it. And what I like about this particular version, he has a lot of footnotes to give you references to some of the things they're talking about in these essays. And they're not very long, these essays. But when it came out, let's talk about Antoine Comte de Gebelin first, because it really was because of him that these essays actually happened. He was born in Nimes, France, around 1725. There's some people not sure exactly when he was born because they think his father lied about his birth. But anyway, his father was a Protestant pastor, and at first de Gebelin followed in his footsteps, but then he didn't have that de Gebelin in his name actually to begin with, but he added that, and then he became dedicated to the social and intellectual life of a French philosophe, philosopher. This is what is in Rhapsodies of the Bizarre with the bio. And then focusing much of his scholarly interest on the exploration of the origin and meaning of languages and symbolism. So his most well-known work was these huge 9 volumes, Le Monde Primitif, and this is where the essays were published, and they were published in volume 8 of the 9 volumes. The Monde Primitif is, quote, a massive work explaining and documenting his theory concerning the existence of an ancient primitive utopia where all the inhabitants of the earth spoke the same language. And he was evidently a really good linguist. Now, one of the things about these essays is it set the tarot world on fire. And I'm going to read you the first paragraph. You'll see why. But the scholarship was not necessarily great, though you have to put things in context as far as what scholarship was like. And whether you agree with it or not, it had an amazing impact on tarot. Now, the other thing I found interesting, as I said at the beginning of the show, was I found out that de Gebelin was a Freemason, but this is what I thought was kind of cool. He was initiated in 1771 in the Lodge Les Amis Réunis and moved on to Lodge the Nine Sisters, which we talked about, I think, earlier with Philippe, the French Lodge. And there he actually met Benjamin Franklin. So that was kind of cool, I thought. And evidently, de Gebelin was all in favor of American independence. So there, a little bit of politics. So that was him. So he's the main reason that these essays happened, actually. And then this other fellow who also wrote an essay, both essays are included in this volume 8 of the, make sure I got that volume, 8 of the Le Monde Primitif. Now, his name, Comte de Mellet, he was also born in France, January 23rd, 1727, and he was a cavalry commander. So I'm always interested when military people are interested in esoteric things in the occult, because certainly they are. He rose to a lieutenant governor of the French army, then provincial governor, and he died in Constance, December 23rd, 1804. Oh, I did forget to mention de Gebelin. He died kind of in a strange way in a mesmeric tub. It was some sort of a treatment using mesmerism on May 12th, 1784. So he had kind of a bizarre death, poor guy. So anyway, so those are the two men that wrote these essays. And they're not super long essays, but when you have a chance to take a look at them, you'll see how, first of all, how it impacted the tarot, but some of it's really a little unique to the essays in that it didn't carry on some of their reasoning interpretation with some of the tarot and the cards. But I did want to read the opening paragraph from my edition, and because it's pretty sensational in a sense. Now, before this time, the tarot was not associated with Thoth or the Egyptian world at all. And so this is the first paragraph it's in the Comte de Gebelin's essay. If one intended to announce that there exists still in our days a work of the ancient Egyptians, one of their books escaped from the flames that devoured their glorious libraries, and which contains their purest doctrine upon some interesting subjects, everyone would be without doubt eager to know a book so precious, so extraordinary. If one added that the book is well diffused throughout a large part of Europe, that for many centuries it has been in the hands of all the world, the surprise would certainly be increasing. would it not be overflowing if one asserted that it was never suspected that it was Egyptian, that one possessed it as if not possessing it, that nobody has ever sought to decipher one page, that the fruit of a delicious wisdom is regarded as a bushel of extravagant figures that signify nothing by themselves? Would we not assume that he, our informant, wants to amuse himself playing with the credulity of his listeners? So there you have it. He announces that he recognized immediately when he saw a deck of the tarot the real like esoteric meaning of it and how it came from Egypt, which of course has been proven false, sort of, because some of the imagery does have an Egyptian lore to it. But certainly most people in the tarot world know that it started in Italy as hand-painted gift for the royalty. So that's what sort of set things on fire. And then there's a little bit more. And also the second fellow agrees with de Gebelin about his assessment of it, though their essays are slightly different in what they decide to talk about. So that's my main rant, is why has it been ignored so much until very recently? In fact, I just recently found English translations. I'm going to probably link them in at the end of the show. And one is by, one is by Donald Tyson, but it's called Essential Tarot Writings, a collection of source text in Western occultism. That came out in 2020, but I think he had translated the essays earlier because I think it was on Mary Greer's page for a while. So it's within another collection of essays. I haven't read that yet. I don't know what it is. So that's good, though, because I think I like Donald Tyson. And then Ouroboros Press, which really started the turn of the century, I think, is a wonderful press that publishes in beautiful ways esoteric works. And they have a really nice version of it on their website. If you want to go and look there, there's only 1,500 copies because that's sort of their spiel. And they do a beautiful job. And one is translated by Danzel Senatiempo with an introduction by Naha Amardi. So that looks really cool. But again, this is, kind of late in the game in the sense that you would think that immediately everybody would be very, thankful, even if they got things wrong. So I definitely wanted to do a shout out to these two men. Now let's go through a little bit about what you can expect in the book itself. And so basically, I have the Comte de Gebelin's essay. He divides it into 8 sort of sections. And the first section is called Allegories That Reveal the Cards of the Tarot Deck. And he goes into the allegories connected to the trump cards. I think that's the way he's talking about. Then he has a little bit about the suits. Then the third section is the way in which one plays tarot. The fourth, this is a really interesting one. I mentioned it on a show before. The game of tarot is regarded as a game of political geography. That's where it's not a complete geographical layout of all the cards, but he breaks down the cards into different geographical areas and also different figures based on the different court cards. And it's one of those things I would like to someday sort of lay out on a map and sort of see what he has to say about it. The fifth section is connection of this game with a Chinese monument. You'll have to read that one. And then the sixth one, connection of this game with another quadrilasaur tournaments. I know I'm saying this wrong. Quadrilasaur, something like that. The seventh is Spanish card packs, and the eighth is French cards. So that's how he breaks it down. So he, more than the second fellow, de Mellet, talks about the trump cards. I don't think they're all, maybe they all, I think they're all in there, but I can't quite remember. But what I do remember is really liking or being sort of like amused by some of his thoughts about the major arcana. And one was in the book, he talks about the hangman as one of the virtues. And he says that it's painted the wrong way, that it shouldn't be upside down. And he seems quite upset by that. So, and then the other favorite one was how he views, one of the most, I would say, superstitious cards in the Trump series is, of course, the Tower. And the Tower, let's see if I can find it quickly. He associates it with, first of all, Plutos is what the Tower is associated with. And I liked what he had to say about it, but I should have probably 5, 6, 9. I can't quite find it right now, but what I remember, he talks about it. It's a lesson contra avarice, and he talks about greed with the Tower. And it is a tower stuffed with gold. It is the castle of Plutus. It falls in ruins, and his worshippers fall crushed under the debris. And then he goes into this whole story about the Tower and the mythology. So it's fascinating. One of the things that I have found going through the lineage of the tarot, i.e. the different people that had different impacts on the tarot throughout its history, is you'll find interesting thoughts and definitions about cards that many people now, they just memorize and say this is what it means. But throughout the history of the tarot, even within that, there are different opinions about what the cards mean. It's not a unified thing. And sometimes it's interesting because I remember reading like in one Marseille interpretation, the 5s are actually very positive and they're associated with love. And if you look at most modern books, you see the 5s as being very depressing and difficult. So there's different views about the different cards. And so it's just a fun exercise, if nothing else, to get you to think about the cards in maybe new ways, or think about the fact that there is no concise dictionary that is the correct tarot. And though people say that, I don't know that they really mean what they say, because then they'll go ahead and publish a book that says, the Nine of Swords is always a death card and a ruin card. And I'm like, yeah, that's not true. So I think it's the way people present the tarot as so absolute, rather than, hey, this is the theories that I follow and work for me. You might have some different ideas. And this is why I use these theories, because I don't think people think about why they have chosen the interpretations they've decided to choose. And I've mentioned this before on other shows. I think it's good to at least learn a little bit about the history of the deck you are using, even if you don't agree with it. Now, let me go on to the second part. And I did want to say, maybe I'll say this at the end. So de Mellet, he has something really pretty interesting in his. It's a little shorter, his essay. And the first thing he does, he divides it into the trumps into 3 sets of 7, each representing an age. And he tries to kind of, I guess, maybe forces a little bit of this idea of the 7, because that, according to both men, the 7 was an important Egyptian number, and trying to look for repetitions of 7. But he takes the trumps and he goes backwards from like the world through the devil, and that's the golden age, and then the silver age, the angel of temperance through justice, and then the iron age, he calls the war chariot, through the battalier, which is the magician. And he talks about these different ages, and things are getting sort of worse and worse as time progresses through the age, and so it's deterioration of things. And then I also thought I liked his opening statement too, because it also had a big effect on the tarot world. He declared the tarot to be a book of Thoth, the first historian. So here we have, this is where, as far as I can tell, this originated the idea of, here's the tarot, it has secret knowledge, it's got Egyptian knowledge, it's written by Thoth. These are the 2 men that started this. And it stuck. It went on. And of course, again, there's things that they wrote about, like I said earlier, that scholastically it really doesn't fit. But they were the ones to actually begin this whole like craze, you could say. He started the occult craze around the tarot. And then there's also correspondences to the Hebrew letters, the 22 letters, which for some reason it's in the appendix. I think it's de Mellet, I'm pretty sure it is, that gets a little overlooked because Eliphas Levi, he did a lot more with it. But something I learned reading the footnotes, this is why I like this. I didn't read all of the footnotes in this Rhapsody of the Bizarre. One is because they're really tiny. So it's a little hard to actually literally read them. So you might need reading glasses if you're like me. But in the footnote, he talks about the fact that the order of the 22 trumps is literally the opposite of what Crowley uses. And one of the things that I remember reading when I first came across Kabbalah and the different occult orders was whether or not who had the real order and whether or not they published it so that the public could see the order of the cards connected to the Hebrew letters. So now this has set me wondering again because I want to say his name right, Jay Carlin, who translated it, he believes that this may be the right order, and he gives sort of an argument that is connected to Aleister Crowley in the footnote itself. So now I'm very confused, and I'm going to go back and maybe ask Lon Milo Duquette, see if he can come on and talk about the order and whether or not it is, does it matter? Does one have the order right and the other one doesn't? Does it, like I said, and who does, if there is such a thing as a correct order? So anyway, that's a little bit about the essays. There was something at the end of, let's see, each of the 22, I love this, the Hangman. I like the ending quote in Comte de Gebelin's essay, and I just wanted to share it. He says that this dissertation is moreover replete with things and so proper to give some sound ideas on the way in which the sages of Egypt consulted the Book of Destiny, that we don't doubt that it will be well received by the public, deprived by the way until now of similar research, because till now nobody had had the courage to occupy himself with subjects which appeared lost forever in the deep night of time. That's such a beautiful line. I love that. Lost forever in the deep night of time. In fact, I stole it for a title of an essay, which was about them. So I've known about this book, like I said, for quite a while. The first time I read it, because it's a little strange, I didn't really retain some of the information. There are some infamous definitions that directly come from this book, and I write about it in my essay on the Nine of Swords, which was recently published in Volume 3 of the Feminine Macabre, is that idea of the Nine of Swords representing death and ruin and destruction. It does come from here. And then also the suits. So both of the men agree that they connect the suits with the four estates into which the Egyptians were divided. So the sword designated sovereign and the entire military nobility, the cup, the clergy or the priesthood, the baton or club, Hercules and the agriculture, and the coin commerce, of which money is the sign. So you can see, except for the suit of cups, how fascinating that it's associated with love. But in this case, it would be divine love, because it's associated with the clergy or the priesthood. So that's where the suit idea kind of comes from. And then from what I can tell by the footnotes, something I've been sort of looking for is the smoking gun. I haven't quite found it, but the idea that a lot of the interpretations for divination for the tarot really come out of playing card interpretations. And that if we are to evolve and maybe make tarot a more unified system, we should not, we should realize that and see if it still works. And that's why you see such a difference between the Nine of Cups and the Nine of Swords, because it comes out of interpretations for playing cards. And this is in the footnotes. So it's not quite the smoking gun I'm looking for, but it's closer than I've gotten before, because I've often felt that. And I've often felt that Waite and even Crowley to some degree, they weren't as interested in divination anyway. on a sort of ordinary level like we are. They had sometimes even poo-pooed it, I think. Though Crowley doesn't really do that, actually. I think he just probably found people annoying asking the same questions. So there's a funny thing about that in his book on Magick, I remember. So, this is where you can see some of the origins of the interpretation of the cards, except for like the trump cards, because some of the trump cards do look a little bit different and they change throughout time a little bit. So I think as part of my ongoing argument is I think we live in a time where we should be testing the validity of tarot theories rather than just perpetuating the same old ones and making new decks. I think that is really the time esoterically we live in. We have so much we haven't dug into and tested, and to test it means you have to use your theory for a long, long time like we have done. So to me, there's a kind of laissez-faire around that in the general tarot community, and they're still basically using and running with some of the same definitions. At least we're talking about what's being published. I'm not talking about people behind the scenes. There probably are people who just haven't written, or they're too busy testing their theories. But it's important to see where things come from, and then to see if, this was written in the 1700s. Do I want to use the same interpretations as these men had at the time? And I think, again, that their intention mostly was to point out that this is a really profound system hiding in plain sight as we play a game. The other funny thing in this particular translation is the translator takes on Michael Dumet a little, who was a card-playing historian that was at times affronted by the idea that the occult world took the tarot. So he takes him on, and there's now and then you'll see this little bit of a tension between playing card historians and occult people. I always have felt that the tarot is both, that it is fine that it started as a playing card system. What really helped to bring tarot into the world was the printing press, and then eventually the ability to print even more easily and distribute even more easily the decks. So really, this is where the most, I would say, influential thing about the tarot in terms of it changing and moving into the hands of regular people has to do with the production of decks. It started out as hand painted for royalty, and now, I can make a deck and print it myself. So that's really and then also the ability to distribute it so widely is what's really changed the history of how tarot is seen and used and abused. So as many of you know, I'm not in favor of all the tarot decks that come out being actually called tarot decks. So anyway, I hope this inspires you to go and find your own copy of this. You might be able to find something free on one of those occult libraries. I haven't yet, but I didn't search really hard. But sometimes you'll see copies of things, and you can get the French essays much more easily. So I'm talking about translation into the English, which I think for me is just a little easier, though I probably could read a little of French. I wanted to see the English translation. So that's my rant for today. I hope that you will continue to question where definitions come from in the tarot, to test things out for yourself and see if they work. And, tell me if you read these essays and send me an email, because they are a little peculiar, some of the things. I really like old esoteric books for that reason. They'll say things you don't expect. So let me know what you think about them. And until next time, I will see you next week. Continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. All right. Have a great week.